The five-star hotel ballroom was bathed in warm golden light, the clinking of glasses and streams of congratulations flowing without pause. On stage, representatives of major corporations took turns delivering speeches, wearing professional smiles and measured tones. Below, managers, secretaries, and partners raised their glasses with polite smiles, the air thick with social formalities. LANGTU stood quietly in a corner. The lights fell across his face, refined features, eyes lowered to conceal his fatigue. His suit fit perfectly, his tie neatly fastened, yet his collar was lightly damp with sweat. He felt as though an unseen flame were smoldering in his chest, growing hotter by the second. This can't be. LANGTU tightened his grip on the wineglass, his breathing uneven. Why would he go into heat now? He wasn't due yet, and the suppressants should still be working. Yet the scent of his own pheromones had already begun to spread, soft, sweet, lingering, as if trying to cling to the surrounding air. The glances from a few nearby alphas subtly shifted, sending a chill down LANGTU's spine. Without time to think, he set the glass down and turned to leave the hall. His steps hurried, almost breaking into a run. The seventh-floor corridor was silent, dim lights casting shadows over the velvet carpet. He pushed open the staff room door and shut it behind him. The small room was dark, the light broken, with only pale moonlight spilling through the curtains. His breaths came fast, his body temperature rising, the gland at the nape of his neck aching. Everything signaling that his heat had fully erupted. LANGTU slid down against the wall, biting hard on his lip to keep a moan from escaping. His hand clenched at his collar as he gasped for air. His own scent thickened, cloyingly sweet like honey, making the air feel heavy and dense. He trembled, sweat soaking through his shirt. The door in the hallway suddenly opened. Footsteps echoed, steady, low, carrying with them a faint chill and the light scent of alcohol. Shen Wenlang had just left the banquet, his coat unbuttoned, his tie loosened. He wasn't one to drink much, but tonight, for the sake of the joint venture, he'd been forced to have a few glasses. In his hazy state, he couldn't find LANGTU. His calls went unanswered, and the unfamiliar feeling unsettled him. Shen Wenlang frowned. Then the scent reached him, sweet, warm, seductive, faintly familiar, as though beckoning. The pheromones made every nerve in his body tighten. "An omega?" he murmured hoarsely, his voice rough with alcohol. The scent led him step by step like hypnosis. He stopped before a half-closed door, moonlight spilling across the floor. The door swung open. Inside, the room was dim. Moonlight outlined a figure slumped against the wall. The small body trembled with each breath, heat shimmering around it. The moment the pheromones hit his senses, the last thread of reason in Shen Wenlang's mind snapped. He stepped forward. Each step felt heavy, pounding into the carpet. His eyes reddened in the darkness, his breathing growing harsher. He bent down, hands gripping the other's shoulders. The sweetness of the scent was numbing. LANGTU startled, watery eyes lifting. His lips trembled. "Don't come closer." But Shen Wenlang could no longer hear. He bent down and buried his face in the hollow of LANGTU's neck, inhaling deeply like a man dying of thirst in the desert who had found water. The scent drove him mad, each alpha breath mixing into the thick air, sealing off every escape. LANGTU tried to push him away, but Shen Wenlang's arms tightened. "Let go." The weak voice dissolved in the scorching breath brushing his neck. Moonlight stretched long, illuminating the entwined shadows. The small room became a cage of instinct and scent. Rapid breathing blended with pounding heartbeats, filling the cramped space. LANGTU struggled toward the door, only to be dragged back and pressed onto the bed. Shen Wenlang used the suppressive pheromones of an S-rank alpha to restrain him, stripping away his clothes with ruthless speed. Smooth skin, a well-proportioned, firm body, a waist so narrow it stirred cruel desire. Shen Wenlang's lips and hands roamed over this bewitching body. By then, he was completely submerged in lust, craving the person beneath him, wanting to merge that body with his own. He lifted LANGTU's legs. His hardened length pressed against the damp entrance and thrust in fully without mercy. LANGTU cried out in pain, nearly losing consciousness, his voice choking as tears spilled over. Once inside, the tightness and warmth sent a shock through Shen Wenlang. He had never felt pleasure like this. He inhaled sharply, then drove forward like a maddened beast, thrusting again and again to the deepest point, leaving LANGTU numb. Each clench, each heavy press blurred together, rapid and relentless like crashing waves. Pheromones flooded the air, drowning all reason. At the peak, Shen Wenlang released everything into LANGTU's womb. The amount was thick and excessive, spilling out and soaking the sheets. Time stretched endlessly. When the heat finally ebbed, only exhausted breaths remained, along with the lingering mix of alcohol and pheromones in the air. Shen Wenlang lay on his side of the bed, breathing deeply, chest rising and falling as he slipped into sleep. LANGTU slowly sat up, his entire body trembling. He looked at the man he had loved in silence for 10 years, his mind in chaos. His throat tightened. No words, not a single tear. He dressed himself slowly, hands still shaking, legs barely able to support him. Every movement felt like reopening a bleeding wound. The door opened. Night wind swept in, carrying away the heavy sweetness lingering in the room. LANGTU stepped out, silently disappearing down the long corridor, leaving behind a night no one could ever forget. That night only the moon bore witness, and from that moment on, nothing could ever return to how it once was. Morning light filtered through the curtains, falling across the rumpled bedsheets. Shen Wenlang opened his eyes. The dull ache from the alcohol made him frown slightly. A faint scent still lingered in the air, softly sweet, hazy, like an illusion. He sat up, fragments of memory flooding back. Heavy breathing, the intense pheromones, bodies tangled together in warmth. Everything was chaotic, like a dream. He hadn't seen that Omega's face, didn't know who it was. He only remembered. That scent had made him lose control completely. He took a deep breath, then let out a quiet laugh. I've really gone mad. The next morning, sunlight filled the office on the 38th floor. As usual, the assistant should have prepared the tea, reports, and documents. But today, the seat outside the office door was empty. Where is LANGTU? His voice was low, not loud, yet it made the chief secretary stiffen. President Shen, Assistant Gao submitted a request for 5 days leave this morning. The reason given was caring for an Omega who entered heat unexpectedly. His fingers paused on the keyboard. Caring for an Omega? He repeated, his voice hoarse, emotion unreadable. A chill ran down his spine. Who approved this? President Shen. According to regulations, a senior assistant may. I'm not asking about regulations. The sharpness in his voice silenced the room. That day, he said little, issuing orders with icy calm. But everyone knew that the slightest mistake would bring serious consequences. Reports were sent back one after another. Meetings were cut short midway. Only he knew. He couldn't bear the strange emptiness in his chest. Night fell. The building lights went out, leaving only the glow from his office spilling into the darkness outside. Shen Wenlang sat alone on the sofa, a glass of liquor in hand, gazing at the misty city. On his wrist, that scent still lingered. No matter how many times he had showered or changed clothes, it wouldn't fade. The alpha pheromones in his body were unstable, surging at times, falling silent at others. He frowned slightly and murmured, "Who on earth was it?" Not curiosity but obsession. An Omega who could make him, an S-rank alpha, lose all rationality. That had never happened before. He took a sip of alcohol, the burn of it mixing with memories of that night. The Omega's breathing, the soft moans, the yielding warmth in his hands. Everything felt as though it were returning. His heart raced, not from desire, but from a strange feeling he couldn't name. In the days that followed, Shen Wenlang remained trapped in that unease. He worked more, slept less. Whenever he passed LANGTU's workstation, his gaze would linger for a few seconds, only because of habit. Not because he missed him. He wouldn't allow himself to. At the same time, In a small apartment a few kilometers from the city center, LANGTU stood before the mirror. His collar was pulled high, hiding faint bite marks, his eyes dimmed. "I'm really an idiot." He gave a soft laugh that caught in his throat. He knew exactly who that person was, the one he had loved in silence for 10 years, and also the one who absolutely must never find out about this. The company returned to its usual rhythm, except that over the past few days, everyone had been on edge, barely daring to breathe too loudly. CEO Shen Wenlang seemed like a different person. His gaze colder, his words curt. Even the smallest mistake was enough to make the entire administrative department's hearts race. The whole floor felt stretched taut, like a drawn bowstring. But this morning, when the elevator doors opened, that tension subtly wavered. LANGTU walked in. The suit was the same style as before, yet his figure was noticeably thinner. His complexion was pale, his eyes sunken. Every step seemed to take a great deal of effort. The cold overhead lights reflected off his face, so quiet and restrained that no one dared to speak loudly. The secretarial staff jumped to their feet. Someone murmured softly, "Assistant Gao, you're back." LANGTU smiled, faint as mist. His mere presence made the entire office breathe a sigh of relief. Since his leave, President Shen had been inexplicably irritable. Many people had been scolded to the point of tears. Today, with LANGTU's return, everyone felt as though the storm had finally passed. Shen Wenlang walked in, his gaze stopping exactly there. In that instant, all sounds seemed to disappear. He looked at the person before him, the familiar silhouette, the thinner face, the eyelashes trembling slightly. In a single second, the anger and resentment that had built up over days were wiped away, leaving behind something heavier: worry. "You've lost so much weight. Are you unwell?" His voice was low and hoarse. "I'm fine. I'm okay." LANGTU lowered his head, avoiding his gaze. Shen Wenlang was about to say something, but stopped. The door closed, leaving only the faint scent of coffee lingering on the sleeve of the person who had just passed by. That afternoon, in the CEO's private office, and signed documents lay piled on the desk. Shen Wenlang leaned back in his chair, his eyes resting on the glass that reflected the scene outside. "You're still thinking about what happened that day?" A teasing voice rang out. Hua Yong lounged on the sofa with one leg crossed over the other, milk tea in hand, looking as though he couldn't care less if the world were burning. Shen Wenlang frowned. "Don't bring it up." "If I don't, then why are you sitting there with that scowl?" Hua Yong gave a faint smile. "I thought you were plotting how to drag out that Omega from that day and punish them." Shen Wenlang's eyes darkened briefly. "No need. Just a detestable, shameless person. I don't want to mention it again." Hua Yong tilted his head slightly, a sly glint flashing in his eyes. "Really? A detestable person?" Shen Wenlang didn't answer. His fingers tightened around the edge of the desk. LANGTU's image surfaced again in his mind. The pale face, the unsteady steps that morning, the way he'd avoided his eyes. A sharp twinge struck his chest, uncomfortable and hard to define. He pressed his fingers to his temple and sighed softly. "LANGTU, he's too thin." Hua Yong glanced over, the corners of his lips lifting. "The way you're acting, it looks like you've got a secret crush on Assistant Gao." "Don't talk nonsense," Shen Wenlang snapped lightly, though his tone softened. "He's my assistant. He's good at his job. I don't want to lose him." Your assistant." Hua Yong nodded, his smile full of implication. "An assistant who's made our President Shen lose sleep for 5 nights straight. I should really tell Xiaoyou about this." Shen Wenlang shot him a glare. "You've got too much time on your hands." "Not at all." Hua Yong rose slowly, walked to the door, and lightly patted his shoulder. "Some things, no matter how hard you try to deny them, won't change, especially matters of the heart." He left those words behind, along with a faint smile, and exited the room. Shen Wenlang remained silent for a long time. Before him, the lights reflected his own image. Exhausted, unsettled, and deep in his eyes, a trace of something wavering. 2 weeks later, everything at the company seemed to return to normal except for LANGTU. He grew more exhausted by the day, his complexion pale, often feeling dizzy and nauseous every morning. At first, he thought it was just lack of sleep, but as the discomfort persisted, a vague premonition began to rise in his heart. One late evening after work, he stopped in front of a small pharmacy on a street corner and, with trembling hands, bought the thing he feared most. The bathroom light was painfully bright. He stared at the 2 red lines slowly appearing on the pregnancy test, his heart skipping a beat. There was no doubt anymore. He was pregnant. In that instant, memories of that night surged back. The heavy breathing, the low, hoarse moans, the scent of iris mingled with clary sage. All of it etched deep into his mind. LANGTU sank down onto the cold tiled floor, his palms clenched tight. That person was Shen Wenlang, the man he had kept in his heart for more than 10 years, and also the man who despised omegas, despised them to the bone. The next day, he still went to work as usual. His job did not allow him to collapse. When he entered Shen Wenlang's office to deliver documents, he cautiously probed in a calm voice, "President Shen, if an omega were to accidentally become pregnant with your child, what would you do?" Shen Wenlang looked up. His gaze was sharp as a blade, freezing the entire room. "I wouldn't let that happen. I despise that kind of person, using their belly to bind an alpha. If anyone were foolish enough to do that," his voice dropped, cold enough to chill the bones, "I would make them abort it, no matter what." LANGTU gave a faint smile. "Don't you think that's too cruel?" But his fingers clenched until they turned white, his lips trembling. "You say I'm cruel. Should I let some filthy omega carry my child and control me? What if it's not what you think? What if it was just an accident? That child is innocent, after all." LANGTU looked straight at him, his voice tinged with agitation. Shen Wenlang snapped angrily, "You know how much I hate omegas. If it weren't for someone scheming, would I ever do something so disgusting? A bastard created through such despicable means shouldn't exist. Why are you acting so strangely today?" At that moment, LANGTU was completely disheartened. "I was just thinking nonsense." He walked heavily out of the office, silently making a decision in his heart. That night, he didn't sleep at all. Outside the window, rain began to fall. The next morning, LANGTU submitted his resignation letter, clearly stating a 2-week handover period. During that time, he did everything he could to avoid Shen Wenlang. If they met in meetings, he spoke only what was necessary, no more, no less. If Shen Wenlang called him, he reported briefly, never lifting his head. The more he avoided him, the more unsteady Shen Wenlang became. He began to lose his temper for no reason, scolding people over trivial matters, forgetting to sign documents, constantly rescheduling meetings. Everyone in the company was terrified. The atmosphere was stretched taut. Watching all this, Hua Yong merely curled his lips. "You look like you've been abandoned by your wife." Shen Wenlang slammed a stack of files onto the desk, snapping, "Has love rotted your brain? You see romance everywhere. LANGTU is my assistant, not my wife." Hua Yong folded his arms and leaned against the door, his gaze darkening. "You're angry because you've been abandoned, Shen Wenlang." Shen Wenlang's face darkened. "What nonsense are you spouting?" He paused, then said, "The other day, he asked something stupid about what I'd do if an omega were pregnant with my child. It irritated me. The next day, he submitted his resignation, saying he needed to take care of a pregnant omega. He gave up arguing with me over some lowly omega, then left the company and abandoned me. And the child that omega is carrying might not even be his." Hua Yong tilted his head, looking at Shen Wenlang with the pity one might reserve for someone hopelessly inept at love. His voice was lazy. "Shen Wenlang, you're jealous. I'll be honest with you. If you don't hold on to Assistant Gao, you'll be lonely for the rest of your life." A brief silence followed. Shen Wenlang didn't respond. He merely turned away, his gaze drifting to the glass reflecting his desk. In the reflection, his face appeared, exhausted, tense, and faintly carrying a trace of confusion he couldn't name. That afternoon, he ran into LANGTU in the hallway by chance. LANGTU was lowering his head, organizing documents. The afternoon light skimmed across his pale skin, so fragile it made Shen Wenlang's heart tighten. Shen Wenlang stepped forward, wanting to say something, but when Gao Tu looked up, gave a small nod in greeting, and quietly walked away, he remained rooted in place, unable to utter a single word. The farther that figure went, the tighter his chest felt. A familiar yet unfamiliar feeling was gnawing at every corner of his heart. The 2-week handover period dragged on slowly. Every morning, Gao Tu arrived early, quietly handling each outstanding task, guiding the newcomer who would replace him, and carefully leaving behind detailed documentation. He didn't allow himself to miss even the smallest mistake, as if he were preparing for a farewell, unwilling to leave anyone with additional burdens. As for Shen Wenlang, during those 2 weeks, he was almost no longer himself. Meetings were postponed, projects put on hold, and partners complained about contracts being rescheduled again and again. He blamed it all on his staff, yet deep down he knew the real reason. Since the day Gao Tu submitted his resignation, he had been unable to focus at all. Every time he passed by Gao Tu's now empty desk, his gaze would linger. The blue ceramic mug was still there, bone-dry inside, much like the room itself after losing its owner. One afternoon, just before the end of the workday, Gao Tu stood at the door of the CEO's office and handed in the final envelope of documents, the complete handover file. "Thank you for trusting me all this time." His voice was gentle, still polite as ever. Shen Wenlang looked up. In his eyes, the person standing there was no longer the assistant he once knew, but a vague emptiness slowly slipping from his grasp. "You're really leaving?" he asked softly, his voice hoarse. "Yes, I think I should rest for a while." "Because of that Omega?" The question slipped out before he could stop himself. Gao Tu paused, a faint smile appearing at the corner of his lips. "You can think whatever you like." He wanted to keep Gao Tu there, wanted to say that the company needed him, that he needed him. But when he opened his mouth, the cold words that came out went against his heart. "If you're leaving, then go. No one is irreplaceable." Gao Tu nodded, bowed deeply, then turned and walked away. The door closed. Shen Wenlang stood motionless in the empty office. A light breeze swept through, lifting the resignation letter on the desk and letting it flutter down to the floor. He bent down to pick it up and suddenly noticed the slightly slanted handwriting at the bottom. A trembling signature. The ink smudged. He was shaking when he signed it. Why? He didn't know. He only knew that his chest suddenly tightened, and for the first time in many years, Shen Wenlang felt afraid of losing someone. After Gao Tu officially resigned, Shen Wenlang nearly went mad. At first, it was only a few brief messages. "Where are you? Are you okay? Reply to me, Gao Tu." Gradually, the messages grew denser, repetitive, chaotic, just like his own mind. "Where did you put my contract signing pen? Are you planning to marry that Omega? That child may not even be yours." The phone remained silent. No reply. At the other end of the city, Gao Tu lay on a small bed in the rented room he now shared with his younger sister. A space barely over 20 square meters, its paint old and peeling, yet clean and quiet. His sister, Gao Qing, was folding clothes, her voice gentle. "Brother, Jianghu is expensive, but the hospitals here are good. I found a temporary job already. Just rest. Don't push yourself too hard." Gao Tu only smiled faintly, one hand resting on his still flat abdomen, where a tiny life had just begun to take shape. He no longer had the strength to reply to Shen Wenlang's messages. His body was exhausted, nausea constant, his thoughts tangled beyond order, and so the messages kept piling up. Meanwhile, Shen Wenlang grew increasingly unstable. He could not understand how Gao Tu could simply vanish like that. Every time he looked at his phone, his heart tightened, an unfamiliar, deeply uncomfortable sensation. In the end, he went to Huayong. Huayong was lounging leisurely in his private office, leaning back on the sofa with a glass of wine in hand, eyeing his friend with visible impatience. "How long do you plan on bothering me, President Shen?" Shen Wenlang frowned. "I just want to ask. If someone disappears from your sight, and you feel uneasy, miss them, feel irritated when you think of someone else being by their side, What kind of feeling is that? Huayong curled his lips slightly. I told you before, you're in love with Assistant Gao. Love? He let out a cold laugh. Impossible. I'm just not used to him leaving. Huayong looked at him as if he were an alien life form, his voice tinged with disdain. You're in love to the point of madness and still refusing to admit it? Shen Wenlang fell silent, gripping his glass so tightly that his fingers turned white. Huayong sighed, stood up, and patted his shoulder. Come talk to me again, once you've figured out your own feelings. For now, go home. I don't feel like talking to an idiot. In the days that followed, Shen Wenlang gradually spiraled out of control. He didn't eat. He didn't sleep. He sat alone in his office, staring at old surveillance footage, clips where Gao Tu's figure appeared. He replayed them over and over, memorizing every bow of the head, every faint smile, every moment of turning away. At night, he took out the few rare photos they had together, flipping through them again and again like priceless treasures. The scent of iris in the room grew thicker, suffocating, his pheromones slipping beyond control. The urge to search intensified with each passing day. He began driving aimlessly through Jianghu, from luxurious commercial districts to narrow back alleys, all for the chance of finding a familiar silhouette. Unconsciously, he called out the name, Gao Tu. Where are you? On the third night, the mating frenzy erupted. Shen Wenlang's pheromones exploded like a tidal wave, causing nearby omegas to faint as security sensors blared red alerts. He pounded on doors, searching frantically for the one presence that could bring him peace. Huayong rushed over as soon as he received the news, and could only sigh at the chaotic scene. He ordered suppressants to be brought in, then, together with several guards, restrained Shen Wenlang and escorted him into a special isolation room, the same place where Huayong used to confine himself during his own sensitive periods. Inside the room, Shen Wenlang roared himself hoarse, fists slamming hard against the walls, his breathing heavy like a wounded beast. Gao Tu, I want to see you. Huayong watched through the reinforced glass, his eyes filled with pity. A few days later, one morning, Shen Wenlang opened his eyes, his head pounding as if struck by a hammer. The room was stark white, carrying the faint scent of disinfectant. It was the isolation room in Huayong's secure facility. The door swung open, and familiar footsteps echoed. Huayong walked in, a glass of water in hand, looking at the man on the bed with an expression that was both mocking and indifferent. So you're finally awake, President Shen. Shen Wenlang sat up, his eyes bloodshot, his voice hoarse. How long have you locked me in here? 10 days. You thrashed around like a beast that had lost its mate. I thought you might actually die in a mating frenzy. Huayong crossed his arms and leaned against the wall. So, are you still planning to deny your feelings now? Shen Wenlang fell silent. His gaze drifted away, settling on the cold floor. Over the past few days, in his dreams, he had been calling one name over and over again. Gao Tu. Every smile, every glance was like a blade driven deep into his heart. At last he spoke softly, his voice choked. I love him. Huayong let out a soft laugh, though it was filled with exhaustion. Finally willing to say it. Shen Wenlang lifted his head, his eyes brimming with unbearable pain. I don't understand why Gao Tu cut off all contact with me. Huayong set the glass down and walked slowly toward him, lowering his voice. Before, you kept denying your own feelings, so I didn't say anything. But now, you need to know the truth. He paused, then looked straight into Shen Wenlang's eyes. The person who had relations with you that night, it was Gao Tu. The words struck like a bolt of lightning. Shen Wenlang shot to his feet, his heart nearly stopping. What did you say? But he's a beta. Huayong replied calmly. I saw him leave that room with my own eyes. His body was covered in kiss marks, and your pheromones on Gao Tu were so strong I nearly suffocated. As he spoke, Huayong showed him the photo he had taken that night. Shen Wenlang staggered back a step, his mind going blank. All the scattered fragments in his memory suddenly snapped together. The chaotic breathing, the rich scent of clary sage, the trembling moans in the night, and a name he had never dared to consider. Gao Tu. My God! he whispered, his voice shaking. How badly have I hurt him? Hua Yong crossed his arms, looking at him as one might look at a pitiful soul. So badly that if you met him now, LANGTU would most likely turn and run the instant he saw you. Shen Wenlang's eyes darkened. He collapsed into the chair, trembling hands clutching his hair, barely able to breathe. Then he stood up and grabbed Hua Yong by the collar, almost pleading. Help me. Please, help me find him. Hua Yong sighed and pried his hand away. Fine. But this time, don't say or do anything stupid. Less than 2 hours later, the entire human resources system, security network, and even Hua Yong's private connections were mobilized. Every corner of Jianghu, from the city center to the outskirts, received orders to search for LANGTU. Photos, records, medical information, everything was swept through the system in a single night. Exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed, Shen Wenlang stared at the screen listing each area that had been searched. Every time a notification reading "Not Found" appeared, his fingers tightened, his knuckles turning white. His gaze burned into the map of Jiang, who before him as he forced the words out through clenched teeth. Where is he? I have to find him, no matter the cost. The news arrived on a blustery afternoon. Hua Yong had just set a stack of documents on the desk when his voice grew low. We've got a lead. LANGTU is in an old residential area by the Jianghu River. But it looks like someone else has gotten there first. Before he could say another word, Shen Wenlang was already rushing out of the room. He didn't even bother to put on a coat. He sped off, tires screeching as they scraped against the asphalt. The wind lashed against his face, but his mind held only one image, the pale brown eyes of that person and the softly trembling voice. President Shen, if an Omega were to accidentally get pregnant with your child, what would you do? His heart hammered wildly, each beat tearing at his chest. The riverside tenement was dark and gloomy, its walls peeling, the air heavy with dampness mixed with chaotic pheromones. Shen Wenlang shoved open the rusted door and froze. In the dim corridor, several figures were surrounding a frail silhouette. Mocking voices rang out, and the stench of low-ranking alpha pheromones flooded the air. In that instant, Shen Wenlang's gaze turned into a storm. Without a word, he stepped forward. The pheromones of an S-rank alpha erupted like a tsunami, crushing everything within range. The air grew so dense it was suffocating. The alphas collapsed one after another, trembling, unable to lift their heads. His voice cut through the silence, cold enough to chill the bones. Touch him one more time, and you won't get another chance to breathe. No one dared move. He walked over, his shirt soaked with sweat, eyes bloodshot, each step carrying overwhelming pressure. But the moment he saw LANGTU trembling, both arms wrapped around his stomach, breath coming in broken gasps, all the fury inside him shattered. LANGTU! He rushed forward and pulled him into his arms. The warmth was heartbreakingly familiar. Soothing pheromones spread gently, easing the tension that had stretched the air taut as a wire. LANGTU slowly opened his eyes, his voice weak. President Shen, don't call me that. His voice was hoarse, trembling with restrained emotion. I was wrong. I'm sorry. He lifted LANGTU into his arms, turned, and left without looking back. Behind them, the oppressive pheromones still filled the space, leaving no one daring to move. The car door slammed shut. Streetlights streaked past the rearview mirror in long trails of light. In his arms, the small body leaned against him, cold sweat soaking into his shoulder. LANGTU, hang on a little longer. I'm taking you to the hospital. His voice shook. No longer the voice of an arrogant CEO, but of a man desperate with fear of losing the one he loved. On the way to the hospital, Shen Wenlang's pheromones continued to envelop the car. The scent of iris softened, laced with cool mint, comforting, protective, like an invisible embrace. LANGTU leaned against his chest, tears streaming down. I won't let anyone hurt you again, Shen Wenlang said, gripping the steering wheel, his eyes blazing. Not even myself. The cold scent of disinfectant filled the hospital room, white lights reflecting off the pale face of the person lying on the bed. Shen Wenlang sat motionless beside him, his hands clasped so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. The doctor had only just left. The news struck like a bolt of lightning. He and the child in his womb are fine. However, for an omega with such severe pheromone disorder, being pregnant without having been marked is extremely dangerous. Earlier, he had gone through sheer terror when he saw blood on his own hands as he rushed through the hospital corridor with LANGTU in his arms. Now, his heart seemed to stop for several beats all over again. He didn't know how to react. Shock, fear, and happiness all tangled together in a chaos he had never experienced before. LANGTU was truly carrying his child. LANGTU woke to the sound of someone's heavy breathing. The first thing he saw was that man. His shirt wrinkled, stubble darkening his chin, eyes bloodshot as if he hadn't slept for days. "Why are you here?" His voice was hoarse. Shen Wenlang took his hand and said softly, "I was waiting for you to wake up. You scared me half to death." LANGTU tried to pull his hand away, but the grip was unwavering. Not forceful, just terrified of letting go and having him disappear. The air grew suffocatingly silent, broken only by the steady beeping of the heart monitor. Then he spoke, slowly, each word clear. "LANGTU, I love you." It wasn't said in a moment of impulse. Not because of the child. It was a confession from someone who only learned to cherish after losing. LANGTU froze, a flicker of fear passing through his eyes. "Don't joke like that anymore, President Shen. You hate omegas." "Yes, I hate omegas. But if it's you, there's only love. No, more precisely, the one I love is you yourself. Everything else doesn't matter." He let out a soft, choked laugh. "I missed you so much I went insane. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Just the thought of losing you made me want to tear the whole world apart." LANGTU looked at him in silence. He didn't dare believe it. The man who had once been cold and extreme in his hatred of omegas was now sitting here, eyes like a chastened stray dog, trembling as he waited for forgiveness. In the days that followed, Shen Wenlang seemed to become a different person. Every morning, he brought food, stood by the bed learning how to cut apples and prepare milk, clumsy to the point of being ridiculous, yet refusing to let the nurses touch anything. At midnight, when LANGTU woke in the middle of the night, he would see him sitting by the bedside, head resting against the edge of the bed, sleeping deeply. Under the warm yellow light, that once stern face looked strangely gentle. His hand still held LANGTU's tightly, as if afraid that the moment he let go, LANGTU would vanish from this world. LANGTU pressed his lips together softly, a tender feeling rising in his chest, part affection, part pain. News of Shen Wenlang's public confession to his lover spread across the internet like wildfire. At 8 o'clock that evening, all of Shen Group's electronic billboards throughout Jianghu City lit up at the same time, displaying a single line of text. "LANGTU, I love you." Along with it came a video. Shen Wenlang in a black suit, bowing his head before the camera. His deep voice so hoarse it sent shockwaves through the entire city. "You don't have to forgive me. Just give me a chance to love you properly, just once." The next day, the media exploded. Online forums went into an uproar. The CEO of Shen Group makes a public confession? Who is it? Who could possibly shake all of Jianghu like this? A Class S alpha, no less. LANGTU was sitting in the hospital room, looking at the man in front of him. Shirt rumpled, tie crooked, yet his eyes shone like those of a child waiting for candy. "Are you angry with me?" he asked cautiously. LANGTU sighed, his voice helpless yet faintly warm. "Are you trying to make the entire Jianghu laugh at me?" "No," he replied, unusually serious. "I just want the whole world to know that I love you." Those words softened his heart. LANGTU looked at him for a long moment, then finally said softly, "All right, I'll give you a chance. Just one." Shen Wenlang held his breath, then smiled. A rare smile that truly came from the heart. "I won't waste this chance." From that day on, the two of them lived together. Shen Wenlang had already bought an apartment in the city center for Gao Qing to live in, so LANGTU felt at ease. President Shen stopped going to the office, stopped attending conferences, stopped meeting clients, The only thing he did was take care of his partner and the child growing inside him. He woke up early to cook congee, looking up recipes like a freshly graduated student. One day he even burned the pot, smoke filling the entire kitchen, yet he still called out with a soot-streaked face, "LANGTU, don't come in. It's just smoke. It's not going to explode." LANGTU stood outside the door, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Truly no one would have imagined that the famously cold and ruthless CEO of Jiang, who would one day become such a devoted homemaker. Even when the company called an emergency meeting, he didn't bother going in person. He simply joined via video call from home, feeding Gao 2 spoonfuls of congee while issuing orders to his subordinates. "Make it quick. My wife hasn't finished eating yet." The entire executive board fell into dead silence. No one dared laugh. Everyone understood just how much President Shen cherished the person beside him. After a few weeks, Gao 2 finally got annoyed. "You stick to me all day. Don't you get tired of it?" "No. Don't you need to work? I can manage remotely. What if the company goes bankrupt? Then I'll have even more time to stay by your side." Gao 2 looked at him, half wanting to laugh, half wanting to throw a pillow at him. In the end, he said, "Go back to work tomorrow. I'll return as your assistant." Shen Wenlang immediately frowned in protest. "No, you're pregnant. I don't want you overworking yourself. Do you want to be kicked out of the house?" Gao 2 asked coldly. Shen Wenlang instantly fell silent, then nodded obediently. "I'll listen to you." From the day Gao 2 moved in with him, Shen Wenlang's life entered an entirely new chapter. A chapter of love and of the fear of losing the one he loved. He was afraid Gao 2 would get tired, afraid he might trip on the stairs, afraid he would eat cold food, afraid he would look at someone else for more than 3 seconds. So, before the day Gao 2 officially returned to the company, Shen Wenlang issued an unspoken order throughout the entire Shen group. From now on, if anyone sees Assistant Gao doing heavy work, intervene immediately. If he gets tired, it means you've angered me. The news spread like wildfire. From the administrative department to finance, from the first-floor secretaries to the security guards at the main gate, everyone treated Gao 2 like a national treasure. On his first morning back at work, the moment he stepped out of the car, 2 security guards bowed at once and held an umbrella to shield him from the sun. When he reached his floor, a female employee hurriedly pulled out a chair for him. "Assistant Gao, please sit carefully. I've already wiped the chair." He had barely opened his laptop when 3 people lined up to place warm tea, nut milk, and filtered water on his desk. Gao 2 looked at the scene, utterly helpless. Meanwhile, Shen Wenlang stood inside the glass office, arms crossed, watching with a smug expression, as if he had just protected a priceless jade from a cruel world. Thanks to Shen Wenlang's soothing pheromones, Gao 2's pregnancy went astonishingly smoothly. The morning sickness disappeared, his sleep grew deeper, and every morning he woke up in Shen Wenlang's arms, their breaths intertwined, so warm that he never wanted to leave. Shen Wenlang became more and more attentive. He learned to adjust the room temperature according to an omega's hormone cycle, looked up every dish that was good for the baby, and even downloaded an app designed for alphas about to become fathers. Gao 2 changed as well. From someone reserved and quiet, he gradually became radiant. His skin turned fair and rosy, his eyes lively, his whole body carrying a gentle scent of sage, blending perfectly with Shen Wenlang's iris. Shen Wenlang turned into a full-fledged god of jealousy. He banned all alphas in the company from approaching Gao 2 within 3 meters. And when one male employee instinctively reached out to steady Gao 2 after he stumbled, Shen Wenlang immediately had the man transferred to a branch on the far southern border within 24 hours. Gao 2 was annoyed, but couldn't bring himself to scold him. He merely sighed and lightly touched Shen Wenlang's cheek. "Do you know how troublesome you are?" Shen Wenlang answered seriously, "I do, but you're too precious to me. I'm even afraid I haven't shown you enough of how much I love you." And so, in a small home bathed in morning sunlight, an alpha who was once cold and aloof now carefully tied the shoelaces of the person he loved, muttering to himself, "I need to learn another steamed fish recipe. You said it was delicious yesterday, And I forgot to ask for the recipe. Gao Tu looked at him, his gaze softening. He bent down and pressed a gentle kiss to Shen Wenlang's forehead. All right, stop studying so hard. You're already amazing. Shen Wenlang froze for a moment, then smiled like a child who had just been praised. After months of careful prenatal care, Gao Tu's health gradually stabilized. The doctor said that an omega's psychological state directly affects the child in the womb, therefore the bond, love, and closeness between the two of them were extremely important. Shen Wenlang listened to the doctor very seriously, caring for Gao Tu while also clinging to him so much it was as if he wanted to stick to him at all times. He tried every possible way to make Gao Tu happy. The moment he saw Gao Tu frown, he would lower his voice and coax him gently, not stopping until the other finally smiled. Anyone who had once known the cold and aloof Shen Wenlang could hardly believe their eyes now. A CEO of the Shen Group who once made the entire business world tremble would panic the instant Gao Tu looked tired, and light up completely the moment Gao Tu smiled. Hua Yong once teased him, "You're seriously ill, terminal wife obsession." Shen Wenlang merely curled his lips into a smile, his eyes never leaving the person sitting on the sofa knitting tiny clothes. "That's right. I'm sick, and Gao Tu is my medicine." Time passed in warmth. Every morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains and fell across Gao Tu's smooth, pale skin. Shen Wenlang lay beside him, gently placing a hand on his belly, where a small life was growing day by day. The feeling filled him with both fear and gratitude. He had once not believed in love, once regarded omegas as shackles. But now, simply hearing a tiny heartbeat in the examination room was enough to bring tears to his eyes. On the day Gao Tu went into labor, a light rain fell. Shen Wenlang had never been so panicked in his life. He accompanied Gao Tu to the hospital, his face drained of all color, managing only to tell the doctor, "Please ensure his safety first. I don't need anything else, only that he's safe." In the delivery room, he held tightly to the hand of the person he loved. Every time Gao Tu curled up in pain, it felt as if someone were squeezing his heart. He was no longer a cold, ruthless CEO, no longer a proud alpha, just a man trembling as he prayed for his beloved to endure the pain. When the fragile cry of a newborn rang out, he broke down in tears as well. Tears fell onto the hand that was tightly clasping Gao Tu's. "Gao Tu, you've worked so hard." The child was named Lele, meaning a small joy, a little angel with clear, bright eyes, a high nose like his father's, and curved lips like his mother's. Holding the baby in his arms, Gao Tu smiled through his tears. Shen Wenlang stood beside them, gently kissing both their foreheads, his voice choking. "Thank you for giving me a family." Outside the window, sunlight flooded the hospital room. In that moment, Shen Wenlang understood. All ambition, all power, everything he had ever pursued, meant nothing compared to being able to stay by the side of these two.